Can you believe this is episode number 79 and you're going to dig it? There exists a threat from anti-hunting groups to politicians trying to give our land away, and we won't stand for it. Those vast western landscapes provide the space for our wildlife to thrive and a place for hunters and anglers to fuel the fire that sparks their soul. In this show, we share our love of hunting, fishing, and conservation. Here, we provide the foundation to meet these threats through passion and the grit of the American outdoorsman. Welcome to the Western Huntsman Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode number 79 of the Western Huntsman Podcast. This is Jim Huntsman coming at you from the Broken Tine studio right here in Clark Fork, Idaho, and it is a great day because yesterday we had an all-day rainstorm. It got all the smoke out of the air. Now today the air is like fresh, the sky is blue, the sun is shining. It's not like blazing hot. I'm just really excited, like energized over the whole thing. We're expecting some more rain later on this week. And so, you know, in our neck of the woods, we've got some fires going on over on the Montana side. And then right here about, 10 miles from my place, there's a pretty big fire going on in the National Forest. And so anyways, point being, I feel like there's a change in the air. The weather is starting to turn towards more of a fall climate. Temperatures are starting to drop a little bit, and I am just hoping and praying these temperatures subside and these fires get under control a little bit. So I know a lot of us out west are suffering from it. So, guys, I have a couple things to cover real quick before we get to the interview portion of this. It has been brought to my attention. There's been some rumblings about this going on for a while, but it has been brought to my attention that there is an organization in Oregon called yesonip13.org. They have presented a ballot, and it's an initiative petition, and it is referred to as IP13, Initiative Petition 13, for the state of Oregon. So what happens is they have to get like 112,000 signatures, I believe. I'm not reading that right now. It's not in front of me. Anyway, they have to get a bunch of signatures. I think it's 112,000. In order for it to be moved into the general election on a ballot for vote by the general populace in the fall of 2022. So a little over a year from now. And what I want to do is I just want to read the first paragraph on this website of the about. So you guys are kind of familiar with what this is. Again, if you're not in Oregon, keep this in mind, guys. We talked about this last winter when we were dealing with the bear ban hunting, or I said that backwards, bear hunting ban down in California. IP13. If you're not in Oregon, what happens in a case like this is states like California and Oregon and these kind of more extreme groups, these fringe left anti-hunting kind of groups, what they do is they start setting a precedence, and that's what's important. So those of us in Idaho that has a general populace that is on the extreme other side of the fence as to what comes out of like Portland, Oregon, or San Francisco, California, or Seattle, Washington, what happens is a precedence gets set, and all of a sudden that becomes a reality which will turn into a norm and spread into other places. Not to mention, as hunters, we have brothers and sisters in Oregon, if you're not there, that need our help. We can't just sit down and allow this stuff to percolate into something bigger than... the thing, actually, let me just get to reading it. It's insane. This is insane. Okay. I'm just going to read it right from their website here. Initiative Petition 13 is a ballot initiative filed for the 2022 Oregon general election. For those hearing about IP13 for the first time, this ballot initiative would remove many of the current exemptions from Oregon's animal cruelty laws against animal abuse, animal neglect, and animal sexual assault. These statutes prohibit the intentional injury or killing of an animal (parentheses, abuse), the withholding of care from an animal, or the injurious tethering of an animal (parentheses, neglect), and the sexual contact of an animal's mouth, anus, or genitals (parentheses, sexual assault). But many animals are not currently protected under these laws due to the numerous exemptions included. By removing exemptions from these laws, animals that were not previously protected from abuse, neglect, and sexual assault would finally receive legal protections. As one might realize, this would impact many industries that currently involve animals. Animals on farms, research labs, exhibitions, and in the wild would no longer be allowed to be intentionally injured or killed, parentheses, labeled abused. Nor would they be allowed to forcibly impregnate, sexual assault, in parentheses. Animals in transport trucks or in the industries already mentioned could no longer be deprived of adequate food, water, and shelter, neglected either. Importantly, all veterinary practices and the use of self-defense would remain exempt from these statutes. Okay, that's enough. Guys, if you want to read the whole thing, which I would recommend you do, go to yesonip13.org and / the About section. It'll kind of talk about it. But let me give you the gist. This absurd petition is essentially encompassing everything from butchering farm animals to hunting to like a rancher breeding cattle, a certain line of cattle, or even people that are, I have friends that are into the racehorse kind of arena, no pun intended there, but they have bloodlines in the horses, and it's a big deal. I've got a funny story about that I can tell you later, but anyway, this removes all of that. It bans hunting, it bans farming and ranching and meat. It does not, and they're very careful with how they word it, right? They're very careful. It's basically, we're not going to ban a rancher from basically harvesting or raising cattle. Does not ban in any industry outright. Here's their words. IP13 does not ban any industry outright, and the proposed changes in the statute would not prohibit a rancher from raising and caring for bovines. It would only require that the rancher did not abuse, neglect, or sexually assault the animals under their care. It's funny how they throw that sexual assault thing in there, as if breeding cattle or artificially inseminating cattle on a farm, which takes place quite a bit, is somehow sexual assault, or hunting is abuse. The neglect thing, I get that to an extent, but I don't believe we need to legislate that. But what they do is they put all these things under these emotionally charged words that people in big cities that don't have any connection to the land or nature can really grasp onto and feel like they're doing this great cause. The words that all this falls under is abuse, neglect, or sexual assault of animals. Abuse, neglect, and sexual assault of animals. So it would prohibit. Essentially, everybody in Oregon would have to be a vegan, with the exception of, they do say they are not going to ban the sale of meat, and it could be imported into Oregon. So think about that. This fringe group thinks that it is their calling or their right to eliminate the rights of others. And it is a fringe group. This is, and I want to start by saying, this thing is it's just kind of laughable in a lot of ways. It's not going to pass. Even if they get the signatures, this will never pass. They're not going to change the way human nature and the way humans have been eating and nourishing their bodies for hundreds of thousands of years. That's not going to change. They're not going to change that here. But what this does is it begins the process of setting precedents to make it more acceptable in the future. So I don't want to spend a ton of time on this. What I wanted to do is let you guys know, as part of this platform, this is what we pay attention to and what we fight. And I want to let you guys know I am well aware of this, and I am actively working on a countermeasure to this. I have also reached out to the one of the, I guess he's the sponsor, the main sponsor or whatever. Let's see, there's actually a word that is, let's see, chief petitioner. He's a chief petitioner, and he is the campaign director for Yes on IP13. His name is David Andrew Mickelson, or David Mickelson. I have sent him a message, and I am trying to get him to agree to come on my show. Will he do it? I doubt it. I doubt it. He's probably not. But I do wish he would. And if for some reason he is listening to this, David, I want you to know that when you come out with a petition like this, that is full of these absurdities and this connotation that you have this moral high ground because you have a misguided view of what hunting and eating meat is, we should have a discussion about it, and you should know that you have to defend your position. You have to know how to defend your position, and you should. Sit down with me. Let's talk about it. I want you to come on my show and explain your position. Explain to me why you think that you and your fringe group have the right in a free country that is paid for through hundreds of years of blood to tell other Americans how they can and can't live. I want you to come on my show and explain that to me, just in case you're listening. And you know what? I'll be really nice. We'll be very professional. We'll be nice. We'll talk about it. We'll have a mature conversation about it. But you could tell that I'm passionate. I'm sure you're passionate about your side, but let's talk about it. Come on. Come on my show. Don't be, well, you know what I mean. So guys, that's the gist of that. And again, these emotional triggering words that they use and phrases that they use, like on the website, it says, "How we end animal cruelty, a better world is possible." Folks, people fall for that stuff. People fall for that because they don't look any further than what that headline says. They fall for that. And we got to prevent it. We've got to prevent this from even getting the signatures required to take this to a ballot, because it sets a very dangerous precedence for our lifestyle and our future. And it is of no business of anybody living in some big city how I conduct my life and how I choose to feed my family and the freedoms that I enjoy. They are not to be infringed. Folks, I believe in the American system of freedom, liberty, self-reliance, capitalism, all those things. And I know that there are some of you in this audience that might have a different view on some of those things. But I believe in it to the very essence and being of my soul. I put on a uniform and put my life on the line to protect this thing that I believe in, that is all centered around freedom. And that's, I think, why I get so upset about some of these petitions that come out and start talking about infringing on my liberty and my freedom and my lifestyle choices. It is of nobody else's business. I would never tell a vegan that I would never try to get a petition going to make it a law that vegans have to eat meat. I don't care what you do with your life. Don't dictate my life. This is America, and you are confused as to what country you are proposing this in. Okay, I'm trying to keep this short and sweet. I do. This stuff is, I get fired up, and I think there are more of us out there that need to get fired up. So, again, guys, I wanted you to know I am working on this. I've got a few things in the works. It's real brand new and fresh, and we're just kind of putting some things together. I've got some ideas. Again, if David there over at Yes on IP13 wants to come on the show, I would encourage that. You should consider it. And we are going to do something about this. We're not just going to sit on our tails. We're not going to just sit around and gripe about how stupid this legislation is, or this proposal is. It's not legislation. I should clarify that. It's just a petition at this point. So, I don't want to just sit around and gripe about it. I want action, and we are going to take action here at the Western Huntsman, and I hope you guys join me. I've got some ideas. We'll be announcing them over the next few weeks. As we it's bad timing. We're gearing up for hunting season, and so I'm really busy, but we're going to deal with it. So today's episode, guys, I think you're going to really like this. I've been thinking about having an episode like this for a while. My guest today, his name is Joel Swecker, And he owns a company called Black Creek Taxidermy out of Rochester, Washington. And he's a firefighter. He's a hunter. He's just a great member of his community, and he also owns his taxidermist shop. And so what he was concerned about is some of the lack of information that is available out there for people that are wanting to have taxidermy work done. So what's interesting about it is we talk about hide care and how to keep out your animal and all these things to make it better for you in the end, and so some of the expectations that you should have when it comes to taxidermist work and how they operate, and wait times and price ranges and all that kind of stuff. And it's just a great conversation. Joel is a great dude. He's a great guy. I feel like he is going to be a great resource in the future for the platform of the Western Huntsman, because I'd love to refer to him on a lot of different topics. He's got a lot of experience and wisdom, and I just really appreciate him coming on the show. So with that, guys, check out the Initiative Proposal 13 so you're familiar with it, so we can talk further about it down the road. And let's get into it with Joel Swecker over at Black River Taxidermy. Guys, I may have said that wrong initially when I was first talking about that. It's not Black Creek, it's Black River Taxidermy. So sorry about that, Joel. But here we go with Joel Swecker, Black River Taxidermy. Let's do it. All right, guys, tonight, well, depending on what time you're listening to it, but this episode, I've got my new friend, Joel Swecker from Rochester, Washington, and he is the founder and owner of Black River Taxidermy, and we are going to have an interesting conversation tonight. Joel, I appreciate you coming on, man.
Thank you.
I'm trying to log into this Instagram account here, and I forgot my own password to it, so I can't pull up your I can't pull up your Instagram, but I've got your website pulled up, and I follow you on Facebook. So this is going to be a good talk, guys. What we're going to be talking about tonight. So Joel is a taxidermist, and he's also a firefighter, which I was super lucky. I was able to catch him when he's kind of off work. You guys, what do you work, like 4 on, 4 off kind of thing, Joel?
Yeah, we work a 24 on, 48 off schedule. This is the busy time of year, so there's lots of overtime to be had. So
yeah.
It's hard to get away from it. In fact, I ran into town today, and on the way there was a fire down the road from my house, literally. So I stopped and got out and helped with that. And they were all my guys were all joking around with me that I couldn't keep away from it. So
well, that's the thing about being like a firefighter, man. Is like it's not really a job; it's a calling, right?
Sure.
And I've had, it's funny because you're right there. We just had Joel Turner on, so he's in law enforcement, and that's kind of the same thing. And you guys are kind of in the same neck of the woods, and it was just kind of lucky we ran into each other the way we did here via the online or whatever, but or an email. And it's funny because this is the exact topic I've been wanting to talk about for a long time, and so I guess I better fill the audience in on what that is. As I said, Joel is a taxidermist, and he's been doing that for a long time. And we decided to have a conversation about how to properly, I guess, cut the hide, prep it for a taxidermist. We're going to talk about basically everything along those lines, because a lot of hunters go out and they screw it up. They screw the cape up. They get it to the taxidermist, and it's all messed up, and there's not much that can happen unless the taxidermist, gets lucky and finds an extra hide laying around they could kind of stitch in. Is that kind of the gist of it?
Yeah, I mean, there's one of the misnomers is that we can fix anything, and there's quite a bit of stuff we can fix, but there's certain things that we cannot fix. And a lot of times, even some of the simple things that we cannot fix, like a cape meaning the shoulders of the animal that we use for most standard shoulder mounts, if something is too short, there really isn't a whole lot we can do about that. And a lot of times we find that some of the very simple mistakes is stuff that could so easily be avoided just by exactly what we're doing here, is just letting people know.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we get into all that, let's back up a little bit. You're in Western Washington.
Yeah.
And I take it now. Joel and I just met today via the phone. We've been talking back and forth via email for a while, but We just started talking today, and so and I do that on purpose, Joel. I want to get kind of your background and let us know where you're from, how you grew up. Are you a lifelong hunter? All those kind of things, and then we'll roll right into that topic because I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'm born and raised here in Rochester, Western Washington. I grew up in a family. My mom's side of the family, a lot of them were agriculture, farmers, stuff like that. And so come October, man, everybody piled into the trucks and hit the hills for blacktails, you know, and elk were kind of one of those elusive animals that, man, if you got one, you were kind of the talk of the town. As I grew up, you know, I kind of found I got through high school, was actually originally supposed to go to school to be a veterinarian, believe it or not.
Oh.
And, yeah. So it's that kind of big joke in the family is I still get to work on animals with what I'm doing now. But,
True.
I got into firefighting and really enjoy that. It's the best job in the world. But I was looking for something on the side. Kind of when I got into firefighting too, I started, getting to know a couple of other firefighters and honestly, a couple of guys that I grew up with, and they really got into archery elk. So I started hanging out with these guys and getting into archery elk, and it went from a let's try this out to a love to a passion. I big game hunt just about most anything that I possibly can, but man, I'd give it all up for archery elk. There's nothing better. So going on, I was looking for something on the side to do, and you know, a lot of firefighters have a secondary job. One, because I think a lot of us have a little bit of ADD and potentially a little OCD, and
yeah.
And so I was always, even from a young age, I always considered taxidermy. I always fell in love with it, even from a younger age. I was doing charcoal and pencil drawings of horses and elk scenes and stuff like that, and so I think the artistic side always had the bug in me. A couple years later, it was literally the three guys that I elk hunt with quite a bit, archery elk hunt. We were sitting around a campfire. All of our families go up to Packwood once a year, and we rent a cabin, and the families kind of hang out for 3 or 4 days. And us guys were sitting around the campfire one night, and I hadn't even mentioned to them that I was considering taxidermy. I talked about it with my wife, that I was contemplating pursuing it, and we were just talking about our favorite topic, archery elk, and they started saying, yeah, it's really hard to find a taxidermist. There's not as many as there was.
Uh-huh.
There was recently a couple that had passed away. A couple of them decided they didn't want to do it anymore. And so I kind of looked at my wife and I said, well, I'll take that as a sign. So I started mentoring under a guy. Some of your listeners may have heard of his name was Tony Pancook. He was a outdoor writer. He was about as close to a professional hunter as you could get. He was also a career fireman. This is how our family kind of knew him. And I mentored under him. Yeah, and so I mentored under him for a couple of years, and he said, I can't teach anymore. I need to go to school. So he kind of kicked me out, I guess. And so then I enrolled in the Montana School of Taxidermy in Helena, Montana. Spent a month and a half there doing nothing but learning everything from tanning to, you know, putting stuff on the forms to habitat work, birds, fish, big game.
Uh-huh.
And I came home, and that was in 2014, and then I opened up Black River Taxidermy soon thereafter, and it's kind of blown up since. And so that's kind of how I've gotten to this point now.
I want to visit something you said there for a minute. Going back to you know, you have like this artistic side. Do you think is that a thing for a lot of taxidermists? Because there is that, I don't know, some people call it the left side, right side of your brain or whatever. Sure. You know, I have that artistic side too, but in a different way. I can draw really good stick figures, but that's not it. It's, you know, the artistic side falls on, like, I like to create music. I like to create podcasts. I like to, you know, that kind of stuff, and that's like my artistic side, and it always comes out in different ways, and I'm always interested in that. And so talk to me a little bit about that and how that kind of translates into taxidermy, because it's a cool concept.
Yeah, I definitely think each taxidermist, especially some of the most successful ones, I think definitely have the artistic side. Now, I don't want to say necessarily unfortunately, but along with comes that is a certain level of kind of eccentric.
Uh-huh.
But I do think a lot of taxidermists consider, and a lot of other people consider taxidermy art. I don't consider myself necessarily an artist. I consider myself more a craftsman.
Yeah.
But I think that artistic side is definitely there, and a lot of it is just basically keeping track of our main subject matter is wildlife. And so in the long run, I think ultimately me being a hunter makes me a better taxidermist. And I think in the long term as well, I think being a taxidermist has made me a better hunter in the end. When I go out and when we do archery elk, before it was always the pursuance of the game, seeing the game, either having stalks blown or coming in close contact with cows or whatever. And it's kind of like, oh, okay, next time.
Yeah.
I now find it when you go out there, you're looking at every detail of that animal that I've never, I started knowing this. I started realizing this very soon after getting into taxidermy, pretty often, that I would study. Oh, look at that cow, the way she's holding her ears, or look at that bear, the way he's tipping his head up, or that blacktail as he's got his nose. Oh
yeah, I didn't even think about that side of it.
Yeah, and so you get those little snapshots in your mind, and you come back and that really can. I think that plays a big role in a lot of the poses that you do, and and how it transforms into the work that you're doing. Every species is different. I mean, incredibly different. If anybody ever tells you that, it's a blacktail or it's a whitetail or it's a mule deer, they're all going to go on the form the same. They honestly either haven't been doing it very long or they're not paying attention to specific details.
Yeah.
The scent gland of a mule deer is entirely different than that of a blacktail. Even some of the subspecies, you talk about Rockies and Roosevelts, very, very distinct differences between the two, even their muscling and even their head shape and stuff like that. So you really have to focus on your subject matter. And that's where I think a lot of the art comes in, is how that can, keeping up with a lot of the, I'll do 50 blacktails a year, 50 blacktail shoulder mounts a year. But if I get a Sitka blacktail in, or even if I'm lucky to get a Coues in, then I find myself looking at reference photos and back, of that species, so that when it goes to form, I can remember some of the details that were involved with that species. So
do you like when you're working? Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off.
No. Go ahead.
When you're working on, like, say, a Coues deer, for example, or whatever, do you have, you're sitting there working on it, you have like the computer sitting there too, so you can pull up different images to give you, is that what you're talking about? Like, and you can get like, okay, that muscle right there on the side of his face cuts in this way, so I got to make like a bulge or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of dependent upon whether you need to go back to reference. I have a binder that has reference photos of all different kinds of, primarily species that I'm dealing with here in North America. Now, you get you can get some real exotics in. Uh-huh. And, then you have to look up photos, and usually I'll print them off and then I'll put them in that binder, and I just have a binder of reference photos.
What's the craziest thing you've ever taxidermied, stuffed, whatever?
Well, I can tell you what I've been asked to taxidermy, and I want
to hear it, man. I want to hear it. Like Aunt Judy.
Yeah. Well, oh yeah. So years ago, I have this group of guys that come out from a little town near Montesano here, and they are a tremendous group of guys. They kill some monster blacktails. And usually when they come in a herd. And they're a fun group of guys. Well, one of them brought their dad, and this elderly gentleman is over there, and they wanted to see the flesh-eating bugs that we have. We use flesh-eating bugs to clean off the European mounts. Do quite a few of those a year. And so he's over there looking at this stuff, and he looks at me and he goes, "How much to do an ex-wife?" And I kind of half laugh, and he grabs my arm and he goes, "Son, I was serious." And I'm like, "Well, that's not exactly legal." So, he shall ever remain nameless. But I think the coolest thing I've ever done, and it's more on the tune of I'll probably never do one again, probably because of game laws, and this animal was completely legit to do, was a South American jaguar.
Oh, wow.
It was a captive bred and raised cat. They had all the document, and some of these species you got to be really careful with what comes in, because there's a lot of game laws, and I've been asked before from people that have had something passed down to them where they want me to work on it, and it's no longer an animal that you can legally work on. Some of the documentation you got to be really careful on.
Is that on your gallery here on the website? Which, by the way, guys, BlackRiverTaxidermy.com. He's got a crazy good gallery. He even got like black bears with blood on the claws and stuff. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're fine. I don't know if the cat. I need to put some new photos on there. That was put up, and I think I updated it a couple years ago. I think I need to put a bunch of new ones on there. The Jaguar is not. I need to get that up there.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
It was a pretty cool cat to do.
That color-faced bear is badass. That's a crazy cool mount. Cool? Yeah, that's a crazy cool mount.
Is that the one with the rock spilling over the edge of the cabinet? Yeah. That was actually a good buddy of mine got that on a special permit in the Tucannon unit in Eastern Washington, and not a gigantic bear, but he shot that bear specifically for the color.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I would have totally shot that bear without hesitation because of the color. Seriously, it's cool.
Yeah, it was cool looking.
Pretty bear.
We've got some really, really cool bears in already this year too, with a lot of color fades. So I'm anxious to see them hit the form. You'll have people that will call on occasion that will want me to do pets, and so you get some pretty crazy requests for those.
What is that? How does that conversation go? Like, Fido just died, and we can't stand it, and we want him here with us. I don't understand. Wouldn't that be creepy?
Well, for someone that doesn't understand it, you're pretty darn close to usually how it goes.
Wow.
So literally 2 weeks ago, and the first thing is I don't do pets. I don't do pets, and here's the reason why. In taxidermy school, the master taxidermist that we studied under, his name is Jeff Welch. He told me, two things you really want to refrain from. One, you want to refrain from doing restorations, I guess is what you would call it.
Where somebody screws up an elk mount or something, and they want you to fix it because the other guy sucked.
Yeah, that, or you'll have someone that will come in and say, man, this was my grandpa's elk, the hair's starting to fall out,
Oh, gotcha.
all this kind of stuff, and we want you, and you don't touch them because, you're trying to fix something that is, at the end of the day, the animal, even the mount, is still an organic material. It will have a shelf life. Now, taxidermy practices differ greatly from good to bad to really poor, and that's gonna affect the longevity of that mount. That's why later on we'll talk about some taxidermy selection and stuff like that. But so restorations, you got to be really careful because, yes, you've been asked to fix someone else's mistake, and you don't know how the animal was tanned. You don't know what kind of glue they use. You just don't. There's too many variables that you could potentially, in the end of the day, cause more damage than better. So I don't do restorations. I'll do, occasionally I'll have guys that will bring one in that are very, very good clients, and it's just some touch up, and I may do that. But pets, you don't do pets because, so when, as you and I as a hunter, when we go out and we see a bull and we're lucky to harvest that bull, we have maybe at most, we have an hour of a knowledgeable visual inspection of that animal.
Mm-hmm.
We harvest that animal. We're really excited about it. But there's no intimate knowledge of how that animal looks, how he acts, how he,
I
all
see
that
where
stuff.
you're going. Yep.
So what happens is you have, an elderly lady that has had a cat for 20 years and the cat dies. She has looked at that cat 50 times every day and knows exactly how that cat looks. You can do the world's best taxidermy job on that cat, and it's not going to look the same. Here's an analogy, and I know it's a really poor one and kind of a morbid one, but if you've ever gone to an open casket funeral, no matter how well the embalmer is, they just never quite look like how they did in real life.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the same principle.
Dude,
so therefore, they're not going to be happy, and I'm not going to be, and I'll be upset, and so it's not a good way of doing things.
Is that like what the bulk of that is when people call you up and they're like, I want my cat, stuffed? What do you call it? I always feel like stuffed is the wrong term to a taxidermist.
Yeah, so
but,
and that's we don't really stuff anything. Everything is used but everybody says that, and that's exactly how it used to be. So that's the term that's commonly used.
So is that the bulk of them though? Like it's like some crazy cat lady that just wants her cat always there in the future? Because for me it just seems crazy. It seems, I don't know.
Oh no, you would be surprised. I've been asked to do, as far as the pets go, I have been asked to do numerous cats, numerous dogs, a rat, a guinea pig, an ostrich, a pet alligator, a pet sloth, I don't know where I don't know. Don't ask me how they got that. A pet skunk, all this kind of stuff. So, and it's kind of like, come again. I could have swore you just said you want me to taxidermy your ostrich. Dude, yeah, that's what I said. He was a pet.
If you have a stuffed skunk, I want it. I'll buy it from you. I need one.
I have
ideas
some
for that.
Skunk hides in here.
Oh yeah, we're gonna work out a deal, man. I feel like that's gonna be the best prank ever on my wife, and I need one.
I'll trade you for a sweatshirt.
Oh man, you got a deal. I'm sending you a hoodie, dude. Oh man, that would be great. No, that's great. So you've been doing taxidermy for a long time, and here you are all these years later. Do you love it, man? Is it like
oh yeah,
just a passion or what?
It's fabulous. I mean, it's besides I honestly have two of the best jobs in the world. They really complement each other, because I come home from fire department, and as a lot of people know, even some that are listening, that are in the fire service, is that it's incredibly stressful, especially this day and age. And it's, you come home and I walk into the shop, and I mean, this shop, I have designed the shop to basically look like, I want it to be an experience when people come in. So we have lodgepole pines everywhere. We have antlers. I've got a really old canoe. I got trapper packs everywhere. I mean, when you walk in, I want it to look like something really cool. And so to be able to walk into that yeah, absolutely. When you're over here, stop by. And so it's relaxing to come home and do that. So I find a lot of peace, and then also it's just enjoyable.
Sure.
So I absolutely love it. It gets busy, and there are times that are, when you're knees deep in, nasty black bears, it's like, God, what am I doing? But, but yes, it's, for the most part, it's really awesome. And that's what a lot of people, I'll have a fair amount of people that will come in and either, hey, we'd like to come work for, or hey, we want to mentor underneath you. But they're doing it at a time when I'm doing something fun. So when I'm putting a big blacktail on the form, I'm sewing up. And that's what a lot of people don't understand about taxidermy, is there is a big portion of it that you don't see that is nasty, not enjoyable, but there's a process, and you have to get through the process in order to get to the end product.
Oh, I know all about it, man. For the listeners out there, I can do a restoration, because I'll tell you, I shot a wild boar, and he was a big boar, man, down in Mesquite, Nevada, and I had the head, great job on the tax. I don't remember the taxidermist that did it, but anyway, I have the mount. I call him, his name is Hillary, and when I was moving, I knocked one of his big tusks out, and I glued it back on with Gorilla Glue. And so there you go. If you guys need a restoration, hit me up.
You're putting the door for taxidermy.
No, that's cool, man. It's a great story. I'd love to come see your shop. I think because I'm in that neck of the woods every once in a while. And that'd be awesome. I love the photo gallery on your website here. Clearly you're passionate about it, and you do a great job. Do you want to start with like kicking off what are some of the things that hunters do that screw up the future mount for the taxidermist, or for themselves, I guess, so to speak? Does that make sense how I'm asking that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of, do you want to start there, or do you want to start with like tools that you want to take, or where do you want to
start with tools and equipment that are best used? Because you sent me a little list here and that helps. Okay, cool. And then we'll get into like caping and skinning and all that kind of stuff that'll just put us in the right direction. So what kind of tools do hunters need if they're looking to do a mount were they successful?
Yeah, so we can even go back just one step further and even talk about, that's what, when we spoke on the phone earlier, that's what I was kind of saying, is it's amazing that there is, guys will spend upwards of tens of thousands, on some of these hunts. And they'll spend, a couple thousand on a bow and gear and everything else. And that's awesome. But they won't put kind of the research into, what happens if I shoot that 350 bolt, or what happens if I shoot that once in a lifetime blacktail, or it doesn't even have to be that you've gone on this really expensive hunt. You could be in your own backwoods.
Yeah, I was going to say, what if you just get an over the counter tag and just, by sheer circumstance, a 360 bull just about runs you over, and you sauce him with your bow, and you're standing in front of it, and you haven't even thought about maybe getting a mount done.
Yeah, and that's the thing is I tell, that's one thing where I really like this type of topic right before the kickoff of big game seasons, because there's a ton of people that will go into big game season and not have a clue as to where they would start with a taxidermist. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to reserve a spot with most taxidermists, but it's always something to keep in the back of your mind, as far as like what you would do. I've been there before. I mean, and I say this because, I shot a bull in 2007, I think is what it was. It was a great bull, it was a special permit. I had no clue who I was taking it to, anything like that. And so I was doing last minute kind of check-in as I get into town as far as who would take this thing without doing research on both the taxidermy and even the quality of work. And there's a big difference between a lot of them. So that's the big thing is starting is,
that's not a horrible topic in itself, Joel.
No, it's not. And I got to be really careful in how I address that because
okay with and sorry, I feel like there's a little delay here. You keep cutting out and I keep talking, then I figure out I'm cutting you off. Sorry about that, dude.
No, you're fine.
It's because I'm in my phone service isn't great. So let's start with that then. Even further back than what tools to take. If you've got considerations, whether you're going on like some kind of trophy hunt, like you drew the best tag, you've been trying for it for years. It's a great unit, or you're like me. You've never gotten some crazy big elk that you would want to spend that kind of money on, but you never know tomorrow. Yeah, you just never know what'll happen, right?
Right.
I guess where I'm going with that is like, how does somebody like me who doesn't have a lot of experience going to taxidermists? Mine is mainly because I'm cheap and I kind of enjoy doing my own Euro mounts, even though they're not that great. They work, if that makes sense. And so
absolutely.
For somebody like me, how do I identify the right kind of taxidermist so I don't take it in and we talked about it, I take in this nice Rocky Mountain bull elk and it comes back looking like a donkey with antlers on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How do we identify that?
Well, I think everybody that hunts has a buddy or a relative or sisters, uncles, aunts twice removed that has a trophy room where you can go and see mounts. And one of the things to start with is looking, if you see a nice big Rocky on the wall, and just say, man, that looks really good. Who did that? I think a majority of taxidermists rely on a lot of just reference or word of mouth. And so that's usually a really good place to start. As far as if you see something that you like, even a stranger, you're in a house over at a dinner party, and you're like, man, that buck looks really good. Who did the work on that? And then you take the name of that person and try and find them. The next step is to try and make contact with that taxidermist. And first off, you want to ask if they're taking any work. Most taxidermists that are very, very good at what they do or are proficient at mount are going to be more busy than you can even imagine. So there's a fair amount of them that are not even taking in work at that time or taking on new clientele. This last couple of years have been really damaging because with the onset of COVID, everything from tanneries to supply houses to materials to chemicals, all of that stuff has been incredibly delayed. And so a lot of taxidermists are kind of limiting what they're taking in because one, they're trying to catch up, and two, they're trying to basically, get done and try and plan for the next year with those slowdowns that are going to happen. So, for this year at least, if you're making contact with the taxidermist, I'd ask that if they're even taking on new work.
Okay.
And after that, the next step would to basically try to, if they're taking in new work, just ask them to go see if they're up for a visit. Go and take a look at their work. I don't want to say that everybody does it, but I've seen it happen, and you have to be careful of it. And what I'm talking about is that with the onset of technology and tech, you can Photoshop anything. And I have seen representations of bucks, and I've seen them on pictures, and then I've seen the actual work in person, and it's drastically different. So
it's not even the necessity of Photoshop isn't even there. Like if you get on a website and they're like, oh, here's our gallery of all the whatever we've done here, all the work we've done. How do we know they haven't taken that off of a different website? You know what I mean? It's kind of like everybody knows Uncle Bob, who claims to be this great hunter. There's this huge elk in his lodge, but the reality is he bought it at a pawn shop when nobody was looking, right? So it's kind of that kind of. I think I'm just like, the older I get, I'm more skeptical of people. So I think of that kind of stuff.
You don't really have too much of a problem with like plagiarism or copyright infringement. But what you do have is, one, you have to understand is that most people that have a website are going to be putting on the best of the best. I mean, and that's fine and that's good. I mean, I'll be honest, that's what I do with mine. I put on some of my best work on there. But it's good to go and visit them so you can see stuff in process. Sure. So that you can see his trophy room or his area, so that you can see, yes, that's a good, especially, I mean, you're asking a stranger to take in one of your most prized memories in the hunting, in the hunting field. So you want to know that there's an accurate depiction of their work that you can see in process. And so that's a really, really good step for someone to go in. Things you kind of want to be. Go ahead.
Let me ask it in this way. When somebody is shopping around for a taxidermist, is there like one or two big things that present red flags in your mind to somebody you would not want to take your animal to?
One is timelines. So the two things that everybody will complain about with taxidermists is, one, the price, and two, that it takes too long. And again, I was a client of taxidermy for a lot of years, so it's not that I'm saying this from a taxidermy. I've been there, I know. The timeline, the one thing you want to be careful of is taxidermy takes time. Mm-hmm. And with a good taxidermist comes a lot of contracts or a lot of mounts. We call them contracts sometimes. And so you have to understand that you're not going to take in a buck at the end of November and expect a 4 to 6 month turnaround. It just doesn't happen very often. It's just, so if you go in there, but with that said, a taxidermist should be able to give you some rough idea. Meaning that he should be able to give you at least somewhere in a 6 month window. The first line in my contract that everybody signs, the first line in the contract is, I have not been given a completion date. And that's to protect me, and that's also to protect the client. But I also give them a very rough estimate. I had 3 bears that were brought in today, and they're every single one of them, they're going to be rugs. And so the guys asked me, well, what are we looking at for a timeline? I'm like, expect a year. Rugs take the longest because you have to outsource several of the steps within the rugging process. So they usually take the longest, but you should be able to give them a general timeline. The red flags would be, you go in and you say, what's the timeline? And they say, don't worry about it, I'll call you when it's done. Yeah, you better be careful with that one, because I had a buddy that had an elk in with a taxidermist one time, and it was in there for 7 years.
Yeah. Yeah, no, dude, I know this dude. He dropped it off at the taxidermist, and the dude went out of business or something and moved out of state, and he never got. It was like a 340 bull, and never got it back.
And you hear that, and that's kind of the crazy thing. Now, there are guys. I mean, there's a guy over kind of in your neck of woods that does phenomenal cougars, and anybody that knows taxidermy knows who I'm talking about.
Well, you can say his name on here. We don't care.
Well, so Phil Sousey. He is the cat man. I mean, he is phenomenal cougars. Now, he takes years, and he tells people that. And people are okay with that if they're willing to. It's just the people that are really vague and don't give you an answer, you got to be really careful with them.
Okay.
As far as references, some of the other red flags, it's, a lot of it is kind of that spider sense that you may get. If someone's not being real particular in what the price is, things can always change with prices as far as if you bring in a bull that you cut way up the brisket, there might be a cost increase because they have some extra stitching to do. But if a guy's like, let's do this, but it could probably change, you got to be kind of leery of that, The other thing, and the other thing too, is going back to references. It's all about references. Talk to people that have used them, and anything that anything that was a problem or anything like that, and you'll know. Usually, if there's a taxidermist that either A, doesn't do good work, or is not very truthful on timelines, or takes an excessive amount of long time, they get known pretty quick. And so, you just kind of, references go a long ways.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's like anything, right? The references, reputation, it gets around. I can't imagine that a terrible taxidermist, that somebody with no talent and just is shady, does shady work, does shady business, dealings, whatever, rips people off. I can't imagine they stay in business for very long, because there's too many ways for things to spread with the internet and everything else these days, and online reviews, which I don't fully trust those, but
right.
there can be a theme that you could figure out just by going through and reading them. So does your wife are you married?
I am. I'm married and I have 2 kids.
How old are your kids?
I've got a 8-year-old and she's going on 24, and I've got a 3-year-old and he's not afraid of anything in this world. So
sweet. That's awesome, man. We'll have to get the kids together one time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does your wife make you watch The Bachelor?
Oh, I'm sure she tries. I usually walk in and it's usually the comment out of my mouth is, "You watch this garbage?"
Yeah. Well, I oblige my wife on that one.
Yeah.
And I'm asking you. I only do that because it scores me points for hunting season and in time I'm able to spend. So I'm and I'll even get into it, because if you're watching it, you just automatically get into it. And I thought it was the dumbest shit I've ever seen. But on one of the seasons a couple of years ago, one of the girls on The Bachelor was a taxidermist on the side or something.
Yeah.
And like, as on the date, they choose to go on these little dates or whatever, and they go out, and she took him to the taxidermy shop.
Oh no.
And this, is, they don't have normal dudes on The Bachelor. They're always these demasculated pussies that just, I thought he was going to turn red and faint and fall on the floor right there over this. And she, was trying to explain that it's a form of art and doing this and doing that and talking about it. But it was interesting to me that again, this can be a whole other podcast, but in the societal, what we consider societal norms today, they'd put something like that on The Bachelor. And I actually was happy they did it, because she did a good job at shedding some light as to what taxidermy is. It's not like some creepy thing, because that's how mainstream folks sometimes portray it. It's like, it's real creepy. They got this weird morbid side to them. No, it's not. It's a preservation thing. It's an art form. It's all these things. I've always admired taxidermists, because I certainly do not have the discipline to become a taxidermist. So I don't know how I got off on that rant.
No, I don't have. That's what some people say. They say, how do you have the patience for this? And I am not a patient person. You can ask my wife. I mean, that's one reason why I got into firefighting, man. I cannot sit in the desk and just,
Yeah, I can't either, man.
But I think there's just some things that just kind of, they're your shtick, man. They click. And that's one of them that I've been fortunate that I've got just enough OCD in me, and I'm patient enough just for that it's I find pleasure in it. So,
do you have is there with taxidermists, is there like this negative connotation towards dudes like me that do their own Euro mounts, like we're just a bunch of amateur suckers?
No,
does that make
not
sense?
At all. I have a fair amount of guys that will call up and they ask now, and kind of like what we spoke about earlier, in the taxidermy world in of itself, that's one thing that I don't like about the taxidermy world. There's 2 different kinds of taxidermy. There's show taxidermy. Well, there's actually 3. There's 3 different kinds of taxidermy. The first kind of taxidermy is Uncle Bob that works in his garage, says, "Yeah, I'll mount your deer up," and you usually get it back, and it's a skin on a form, but the thing looks like it's got schizophrenia or something, or a little bit of cross-eyedness to it. So you have those kind of taxidermy, which is fine.
The nostrils are at different levels on the muzzle,
right? And they think it looks great, and that's fine. Then the other type of taxidermy is there's show taxidermy, where these guys will spend, these guys can compete on a state, national, international level, and they're spending 8 hours alone on an ear, for the veining and everything else.
Sure.
And these deer are judged to the highest level, everything from the glass in the eyes to the to the eyelashes. I mean, it's insane work. And those guys, they are incredible. Those are the true artists. And then you have what 95% of all other taxidermy, which is commercial taxidermy. And, you know, it all looks really good. A lot of those guys will compete on a show level at some point. And it's good to do that because you kind of get to see what insanely good work looks like. But for the most part, when you go in and you couldn't afford a showpiece unless you're Bill Gates or someone like that. Like there's no way you could afford it. So most of the time you're getting, and commercial taxidermy is really good. But that's, you know, it's about, you know, turn around and get stuff done. But to answer your question, no, I offer help as much as I can. Now there's secrets to everything that we do. Everybody, like my Europeans that I do about 300 of them a year.
Well, and you do the bugs and all that.
We do, but the bugs, that's the thing. The bugs is just a very small process in it. You know, the bugs, all the bugs do is they get the meat off the skull. The real true art to a European is the degreasing process. And so, you know, you have to kind of, that takes in a step of itself, and it kind of takes a little bit of time, and there's some steps to it. And I'll help people, you know, do their own. That doesn't bother me one bit. So
there. Okay, I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna ask you, man. And I'll pay you. I'll pay you for the advice. You know, but I boil mine, but I put a little dish soap in there to kind of degrease it, and it seems to do pretty good. But I mean, mine are not show ready. Mine are just I throw them on the wall. They're way up. People can't, like, if people got close to them, they'd be like, who did this shit work? You know what I mean? And I'm okay with that. It's more of a thing for me that I enjoy doing it. I enjoy doing it and getting the skull as wide as I can and all this stuff. But anyway, the long way to a short answer is that appropriate? Throwing a little dish soap in there to kind of get the grease off, or is that just laughable in your mind? And be honest. No, be honest. You can rip me apart, dude.
No. Yeah, that's absolutely good. I mean, shoot, I used to do it with my buddies back when we'd all shoot blacktails, and we'd go and sit around a half rack of beer and friggin' boil heads out for the day.
Yeah.
But there's two things with that you got to be careful of. Is one, boiling heads is really, really hard on them. Let me guess, your nasal cavities and stuff like the nose bones start getting really loose.
Okay.
And you have some teeth that fall out.
Yes, but I have gotten to a point in which. Well, I'm not defending my work. I'm not trying to defend my work. It is the last 4 or 5 deer that I did, and the last elk I did by myself. I saved the nasal cavity bone there, and it's still intact. But it took me a long time to get to that point.
Yeah, and what you're doing is fine, especially for someone that just wants to put them there. You know, at the end of the day, what you're happy with, that's fine. It doesn't matter to me if someone wants that. Yes, that's what I tell people. The other trick you can do, honestly, is if you're going to do the boiling method, this is where I'm probably going to get in trouble with other taxidermists, not necessarily myself.
But divulge an industry secret.
You're right. I'm gonna get all kinds of calls later, be like, "You son of a bitch." No. So the trick is not to boil them, to get to that point where it's like kind of rolling, but not quite boiling. You know.
Oh yeah.
And then the other,
that's what I do.
And so it's
for sure.
Just kind of simmering. Yeah. And then the other thing is Dawn dishwashing soap looks good. The other thing you really use is after a lot of that meat comes off, man, do the OxyClean. Put a half a scoop of OxyClean in there.
Doesn't that have bleach in it though?
It does a little bit, but not enough. It's not going to affect that skull like you would think it's going to.
Does it bleach the bottom of the antlers?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
It won't do that. It just leave it in there for 2 or 3 hours. The thing with boiling them is that the one step that you're missing with boiling, and that's the thing, is people that want to do their own thing, that doesn't bother me one bit. At the risk of sounding cocky, and I'm not, I've got more work than I know what to do with. So it's not going to necessarily take away business from me. But one thing that does get somewhat irritating is people that will get on like some of these sites and they'll be like, don't take it to a taxidermist. I can do it just as good. And they'll show a skull that they literally just got done whitening. And the thing looks frickin' awesome. Now, what they're not showing you is what that skull looks like in 4 to 6 months.
Yeah.
because what's going to happen is all the grease spots are going to pop.
They do.
And they're going to start getting discolored, and you might have a little bit of a smell.
Yep, I would second that opinion, hands down. I've had that happen to me many times. So
yeah. And so with boiling, that's what you don't get, is you don't get that long degreasing period that you truly need. So when you whiten it, those don't happen.
Okay.
And so that's what you kind of miss on that.
All right. Well, I derailed this whole conversation here, and I don't mean to get you to divulge industry secrets, but honestly, no. In my defense, I have not shot any. If I shoot something that is like worthy of a skill level on your level, like you, I'm bringing it to you. But I've never shot like a 350-inch bull elk. It's just not. I just throw them up in the shop or whatever. So,
right.
Anyways, that might change. Yeah, that might change, and so I think that's a lot of what it is. I have shot some rather large mule deer. I wish I would have taken to somebody like you in the past, but again, I, like you, grabbed a 6-pack of beer and did it myself and broke the nasal bone and all that kind of stuff. So if you're anything like me, hunting is a year-round thing for you, and we're always thinking about how to make our next upcoming season a little bit better, and one way to do that is with gear. And you guys know I'm not a big gear junkie, but I do have some important gear items that I'm always a huge fan of, and they're right here available on this show. Let's talk about Scree gear. Scree is my go-to camo. Scree is high-performance hunting attire and gear, scientifically tested camo patterns, and all backed by a great company, and I wouldn't recommend it to you if I didn't truly believe in the Scree product. They've got a complete layering system for all terrain and conditions, gear designed to adapt to the weather. It's rugged gear. It's got a lifetime warranty, VIP sizing and exchange program. You can't go wrong with Scree. Get the best out there without breaking the bank, and to make it even better, use promo code The Western Huntsman for 15% off and free shipping. Hell of a deal. Check it out at ScreeGear.com. Next on the list is my oldest and fondest sponsor of the show is Phelps Game Calls. One thing I love about companies like Phelps Game Calls is the American success story that came out of it. And Phelps started in Jason Phelps' garage years ago, and it's now one of the premier hunting call companies on the market, and I wouldn't point you in that direction if I didn't feel like they were the best calls available. Jump on PhelpsGameCalls.com. When you find a call you like, use promo code Huntsman10 for 10% off. I promise you, you will not regret it. Hoffman Boots. Hoffman Boots is a go-to boot company I've been using for years and years and years. And the cool thing about it is I'm only on my second pair of Hoffman Explorers. I put lots of miles on my Hoffman Explorers. They're a great boot. They're not going to cost you a small fortune to get. And they have all the same guarantees and warranties that every other company out there has. If you want to be confident, guys, do not skimp on boots. Go to HoffmanBoots.com. Get you a pair of, for me, I like the 8-inch Explorers, but they also have the 6-inch. They have all sorts of different options. Check it out at HoffmanBoots.com and use promo code Huntsman10, all caps lock, for 10% off. And last but not least is Tacticam. Are you interested in filming your hunt? And are you interested in helping with conservation efforts throughout the North American continent? Well, then I got a deal for you. Tacticam is a point-of-view type kind of camera that records in 4G. They also have other products like the Film Through Scope, the FTS, and you attach that to your rifle scope and you can film your shot right there. And they have the mounts for your shoulder, for your head. You can mount it to your bow. You can mount it to wherever and whatever you want. Lots of versatility with the Tacticam. Other products include, but are not limited to, the fisheye camera. The Tacticam Spotter LR is definitely worth a look if you want to film what you're seeing. through your glass while you're actively hunting and get it on camera. It's a great thing. But I think that the thing that I'm most excited about with Tacticam this year is the new Reveal cell cam that is coming out. This trail camera will send you images in real time as they're coming in. They've got like an enhanced antenna for better service. If you're like managing property or something like that, or you've got a bear bait set up somewhere that you have phone service, you can get those pictures right there to your phone. This cell cam is super, super cool. I'm really excited about it. And you can get all this at the westernhuntsman.com/gear. Go to the gear shop. You'll find all the Tacticam stuff right there. Best pricing out there on it. And what happens is we split the profitable revenue from these sales of the Tacticam gear, and half of it goes to conservation efforts, which vary depending on what quarter of the year it is. Right now we're raising money and trying to get some money over to Sportsman's Alliance. It's a great cause, and that is what's going to go down when you shop for Tacticam gear at thewesternhuntsman.com. So go over there and check it out and get you a camera. Guys, let's get back into it. I sure appreciate it. Let's get back to, we kind of covered that pretty good. Let's get back to the tools that you recommend hunters take in the field, and kind of roll through that, and then we're going to talk about caping it out.
Yep. So let's figuratively say someone's getting ready to go into a backcountry hunt, okay? And they are going to potentially, or even shoot. I mean, even like I said, even if they're going in their backyard and they have an animal that they want to cape out. One thing that we deal with in the taxidermy side of things is one, some improper caping techniques, which we'll go into a little bit later on. The other thing that we deal with is that people tend to not have the right types of tools. And I mean, even as far as going by knives, a lot of times people want to take, grandpa's old knife as a heritage thing to take in there and use. And there's nothing wrong with that. I have one myself. But a lot of times what you're finding is they're not having the sharpest tool to make the cuts that they need to have. I use, two of the really best knives that I think you can use as far as like caping stuff. The two tools you should take in there if you know you're going to be caping an animal out is one is get one of those flathead screwdrivers, like those real short ones, but the real stocky ones. They call them shorties. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
The other thing is a really good blade. And what I mean by a really good blade is something that may be potentially replaceable. So like a Havalon, I like the Outdoor Edge because they have a reinforced spine. The Havalons sometimes are a little flimsy. So like if you're working on something, a real thick hide like a moose or an elk, if you're not careful, they can tend to break on you. But it's something super, super sharp. So when you're making that cut, it's a nice clean cut. You don't have jagged edges, because when you have jagged edges from an animal that's brought in, what happens is when you try and sew that together, one, it's a huge bucket. The other thing too is that if it has a jagged edge, a lot of times what we're forced to do is actually recut that seam line so that when we stitch it together, it comes together in a very nice clean seam and it holds the stitch. It hides the stitching line.
So it's okay. So a straight cut is achieved better. Obviously, we're gonna want to talk about nice sharp blades and all that. I use that Gerber. I can't remember the name of it. It's a replaceable blade type. Yeah. And I love it. I freaking love it.
Any other replaceable? Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say that you shouldn't have a regular knife. It just needs to be really sharp. And typically we have someone that has like a fixed blade knife or their traditional hunting knife they've had forever. It's not as sharp as what it needs to be in order to cut some of these hides in a nice even line.
How's about my Rambo knife with the compass on the
Yeah, right. That's what I'm talking about. Absolutely.
It weighs 3 pounds.
Yep. You can club the deer over the head if it's not quite dead, and
right.
Keep going.
You're dang right.
So.
Okay, that's good advice.
So the knife, and then the flathead screwdriver, and the flathead screwdriver, especially with an animal that has a horn or an antler, I should take that back, is that everybody wants to, So there's two ways to cape an animal. You can cape an animal for just a shoulder mount, which is what 95% of the animals that come in for a shoulder mount is they leave the head in the skin. So it comes in with the head still in the skin, with the cape, or the cape all the way back to about mid body for a shoulder mount. Okay. The other way to do it, and I highly recommend that unless you have done this several times, you don't do it. However, the guys that go into the backcountry, it is a skill that, man, if you know how to do, it will save you, one, so much weight, and two, the longevity of that hide will triple, if not quadruple, from the time you're in the backcountry. And that is being able to take the skull off, or take the hide off the skull in a manner to preserve all of the I can't think of it, all the tissue and stuff that we need in order to do a mount.
Oh,
all the
that
inside,
seems pretty challenging.
Yeah, and it's not hard, but you need to be able to have done it once or twice, before you just go ahead and start doing it. Because we have guys that will try and do it, guys and gals that will try and do it first time in the field, and they'll usually cut the scent glands off, or they'll nick the eyes. And it's the places that are the hardest to fix that inevitably, that's the area that gets hit. So, there's you got to be really careful, because I call them YouTube warriors. You have guys that get on there and they watch a YouTube video on how to, take the skull off, or take the cape of the skin of an elk off the skull. And then they're like, all right, we got it. And then they go out and then they'll come in like, oh yeah, I watched a YouTube video. And I'm not kidding you. Very rarely is it done, or there isn't some pretty significant nicks where it's going to affect, you're going to see it no matter what you do. It's going to be really hard to fix.
Sure.
There's classes. I'm actually going to be probably offering a class this next year, potentially at a local archery shop here at Lucky Shot Archery. We're talking about doing that so we can have like a seminar. Guys can come out and actually learn to take the hide off the skull of an animal proficiently.
I would love to do go to a seminar like that, and like have you come out here and do one in like Idaho, North Idaho or something, because when you say be able to get the hide off the skull, for me, when I'm doing like a Euro mount myself, that's always the most time consuming thing for me, is getting it all off the skull. It's a pain in the butt. And
well, Euro mounts aren't bad. I can do a.
Well, but you're a professional.
When you do
I have an IQ of 9, and so
I'm not claiming I'm smart. Let's get that straight right now. But when you have as much time doing it as you can, I actually timed myself once on how long it took to take the skin off a deer for a Euro mount. Now, granted, this was not something I was going to use for a cape, but I can have one off in about 2 minutes and 40 seconds flat, completely clean, ready for the beetles.
Man, that's a lot better than my 24 hours and 27 minutes. So
3 beers. So.
Well, a lot more than that. But when you're talking about doing one of these seminars, how do you show that? What do you bring in some roadkill or something?
Yeah, so therein lies the challenge with doing something like that. And there's 2 ways of doing it. Is one, you tell everybody, hey, if you go out and you shoot a deer, save the cape, leave the head in the skull. You don't have to save the cape. Just leave the head in with it on there, and I can show you how to do it. What I'm looking into for the seminar that we're talking about potentially coming up is I will actually go to a couple of these dairy farms, and actually they have the calves that, the dairy calves that die, and they would basically give me the dairy calves, and I would take the head and the cape, and I would have a bunch of these I would freeze them, and then the time before the seminar, we would bring these in, and we would go over on how to remove these from the skull so that you get an accurate depiction of what you're doing. Now, the only caveat to that is you're not going to have antlers to work with, but we can talk about that, and that's not that hard.
God, that's cool, man. I'd love to do that.
Yeah, so that's my plan for the next year. This is the entrepreneur in me coming out, but
we'll stay in touch, dude. We're gonna get you to Idaho.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to come there. So
yeah,
but so that's you can teach a lot, because where the screw ups kind of happen is right around the scent glands and the eyes, and then starting it. Everybody kind of starts it from the back of the head forward, and no, you should start it from the mouth forward, or mouth back. But
okay,
that's a whole different topic in of itself.
Yeah, so. No, that's good information though, because my initial reaction is to go from the neck forward, not from the mouth back, and so
you want to start at the mouth and get halfway up that face, and then that way when you finally roll that cape forward, or when it comes off the skull, because what happens is you get down there and then you end up sending the blade right through the nose or something like that.
Yep, I've done that.
But
okay.
Yep. So anyway, so that's kind of a quick and easy as far as the tools that you need to take back in there. And that is if you're caving. If you're not going to be taking it all the way off the skull, just take a really nice sharp blade with you. And that kind of leads us into the next one, which is kind of some of the cuts that you want to do. It's really hard to describe, what cuts that we're talking about without showing like a picture of them.
And Joel, before we go there, can I ask you one question?
Certainly.
When getting back and in reference to leaving the skull in to take it to a taxidermist or removing it, in the field, I think the question is going to pop into a lot of listeners' minds because you're talking about doing one of these seminars. It's hunting season. I mean, hunting season is on us now, right?
Yeah.
So that's not going to happen prior to hunting season. Nope. The question I would have is, what is the cost difference between and just, you don't have to give us an exact number, but like ballpark us a cost difference between taking the skull, the hide off the skull versus leaving the skull in and having the taxidermist do it.
Well, and that's the thing that I should probably say too, is that what I'm telling you is, like what I'm telling the listeners and stuff as far as taking the skull out of it. If you have a taxidermist that you're going to use, check with him first before you just go ahead and do that. Because
that's a good point.
A lot of guys, I can use me as an example. If some guy called me up tomorrow and said, man, I got this moose hunt going, I went and did this skinning technique and I think I'm proficient at it. What do you think about me taking the skull off? I can tell you what I'm going to tell him. And that's going to be, I would prefer that you don't. But if you have to, go ahead, but really pay attention. And I may even actually say, hey, why don't you come by for a visit? We'll go over a few things first. So don't just do it and then expect to take it to a taxidermist. And Joel Black River Taxidermy said, this is the way I do it. And then, next thing I know, I get a bunch of nasty ground.
And then I'll get him too. Oh, I heard him on the Western Huntsman.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to defer to you. Well,
I love it, man.
Me, so that's one thing you always want to run by your taxidermist and just say, hey, is this what you would prefer to do?
Good point.
So that,
Okay. That answers that. That answers that. I think we'll just leave it at that because that's going to be super dependent too on who your taxidermist is and with their price structure. And it amazes me. Like we have listeners all over the country, all over all over the world, man. I get this weird, and I've talked about this on some past episodes. We get some strange country that'll pop up on my downloads map. Like one dude in like Indonesia or something will download every week for, I don't know, a couple months, and then he'll stop, and then some other country will pop up. Anyways, the point being, taxidermists in Texas are going to be costing, they're going to cost different than somebody in New York versus Washington versus, Montana. Your market, your regional marketplace is going to dictate a lot of those prices. So, moving on. Oh, go ahead.
As far as the prices too, to get back to your original question, there's really no difference. If some guy takes it off the skull, I'm not going to cut him. I'm not really going to take off any cost on that, just because it's a skill that it may have taken him very long time to do, but it's not going to take me.
It's not going to change your time frame.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like if this guy comes in, he's got a blacktail and he's taking it off the skull. I've got some guys that kind of live out by the coast, and they're one group of my clients that when they say, hey, we got some bucks, we already caped them out and took them off the skull, I know for a fact, I'm like, okay, I know they did good.
Cool.
And when they come in, I don't really give them a cost break just because it doesn't really, I'm not trying to be a stickler. It just doesn't really take that much time to do. The real labor is then what we call turning the capes, which is we turn the lips, ears, and eyes inside out. That's what takes the labor in it. But that's down the road in the taxidermy process. So
I wish I was a good enough hunter to be like, yes, Joel, I will see you next year with my giant monarch. I'll call you and let you know that I've caped it out over the skull and we'll be in good shape, friend.
Right. I'm just not that good. The ones that scare me are my high rollers, the guys that make a lot of money and they go on those exotic hunts. And I love those guys because they bring me in some really cool stuff. But they always scare me because they'll go to New Zealand or they'll go down to Old Mexico or they'll go on some of these, real rare ones. And they're like, oh yeah, the guys there did all the work. I'm sure it's fine. I can tell you right now that just because it's a professional guy that did it, that doesn't mean jack squat sometimes. I've had stuff brought in. I'm like, oh my gosh, did you skin this thing with a John Deere riding lawnmower or what did you do? So it's just because of, anyway, you get all kinds sometimes when you get some of these animals in. And like I said, you can fix a lot of stuff, but some things it's just kind of, and that's what a lot of guys kind of, forget kind of going into the next thing is just, the cuts and things like that. So.
Yeah, I have a feeling you have multiple campfire stories that we can go back and forth on with that kind of stuff. So,
yeah.
Okay, let's roll into that then. The caping skinning methods and special consideration for most common species in the western states. That is very well articulated by our humble guest here, Joel. And I'm actually really glad you laid this out. Like, it keeps me on track. So I'd love to talk about caping and skinning methods. I don't think that gets covered enough.
No, and so I'm going to cover just a few of the major species, because a lot of them are very similar. Any of the ungulates, so any of the elk, deer, moose, they're all pretty much the same as far as like if you're going to do a shoulder mount. The two, as we talked earlier on the phone, the two species that I see that are screwed up the most are bears and elk, and we'll kind of go into that.
Okay,
I wouldn't have
thought that. Okay,
yeah, good. and a lot of times. So like with deer, moose, and elk, any antelope, you name it, anything that you're going to do in a shoulder mount, any horned or antlered animal, if you're going to be doing a shoulder mount, the big mess up that we see is a lot of times people will not get enough brisket on the animal, or they won't, and it usually goes hand in hand, or they won't go far enough back. If you look, and what I mean by far enough back is that you get an animal on the ground and you're like, this is something I want to turn into a shoulder mount. Usually the first cut you're going to do is a circumference cut around the circumference of the animal that is where the shoulder mount needs to end, if you will, where the form meets the wall. If you get on the internet, there's all kinds of different formulas, if you will. Oh, you need to go 3 inches behind the second rib. Man, don't listen to any of that crap. The best way to do it is go literally halfway around the midsection of the animal and make a circumference cut all the way around the midsection of the animal.
Okay, so when you say that, I'm going to overshoot that in my mind because I don't want to jack this up. So let's talk about, we've got an elk laying on the ground and we're like, holy crap, I can't believe I just shot this giant bull and I want a shoulder mount on this. In my mind, and I want you to correct me, in my mind, I'm going to take that cut back to, that area almost right as the rib cage ends. Where it starts getting a little bit thinner, and you're just kind of before the groin area by, I don't know, maybe 6 inches or so, maybe 8 inches. I don't know. I've never measured that.
I always tell
I'm just
people
going to take more than come in with less. Make sense?
Yep.
Where am I wrong?
A good way to measure it is go. Everybody knows where the paunch is on an animal. It's that little. If you basically go to the paunch and you go, and then there's the spot right between the shoulder blades and split the difference, that's about halfway of an animal.
Okay.
I hope that makes sense. Yep. So basically the spine in between the two shoulder blades and the paunch, split the difference. That's where you make your circumference cut all the way around. And that doesn't take any guess out of it, because you can't guess, if you end up guessing and people are trying to get, I mean, let's be honest, I'm a backcountry hunter myself. When you get an elk down, man, everything's about weight, right?
Yeah.
So you want to keep as least amount of weight on there. So I get it where people want to like, hey, this is what he needs. This is what the taxidermist needs. Let's cut it right here. The problem is, man, you're really skating the line, and you're also skating the line because there's a lot of new forms on the market right now that incorporate more of the leg on the elk.
Yeah,
or if you decide that you want to do like a pedestal mount or something like that, they need more hide than your standard shoulder mount. So don't, and if you get half the animal, you're going to be fine. So don't guess, just take half of it. Yeah, you've got another 5 pounds, but I'm telling you, in the long run, your taxidermist is going to be happier, and you're going to be really glad you did that. Versus a taxidermist calling you going, holy smokes, I don't have enough here. It's going to be really tough to get this done.
This is nuts, man. So, I just switched over on your galleries page. You've done some huge ass blacktail, man. Do you have like some GPS coordinates where those were taken?
You know how many people come into the shop every year and they look at one and they're like, where's that one?
Where's that?
Because
Can you show me?
Because the state of Washington Fish and Game, they give me a game book, and I have to keep track of where all these bucks come from, or any wildlife. And so some of these guys, but I mean, you let out one secret, which I'm a hunter myself. I know how it is. As Jason Phelps says, you play the public lands dance,
Yeah.
You guys see anything? No, I haven't seen a thing. So it's the same thing. You get some of these guys that come in, they're like, where'd that come from? And I just always tell them the same, which I'm being honest, a lot of the time, like, I can't remember. But yeah, there was some monsters. Oh, you should see some of the blacktails from this year.
Why don't you just tell them, like, it's none of your business? You ever heard of that location?
Oh, no,
I
do.
You don't ask that question.
There's a couple of guys, that are pretty big hunters and stuff, and they'll come in and where'd that one come from? And I just give them a look like, really, dude?
Yeah. I always say it jokingly. I don't expect anybody. I actually said it jokingly to a dude locally here. He was showing me a picture of his bull. Was it a bull or it could have been a wolf? I can't remember which one it was. Anyway, I was joking like, whoa, where'd you get him, man? I need to go there. And he actually told me. I'm like, oh yeah. Thanks, man. I shouldn't have done that.
I had a guy last year I was talking to about an Idaho spot, and he brought in this really nice bull, and they consecutively be bringing nice bulls this ground. And I was just joking around. I was just like, oh yeah, you guys do pretty good over there. Yeah, we start at this trail and we go in. I'm like, dude, you don't want to be telling me.
Is he a local out in your area, or is he an Idahoan?
Yes, he's a local here.
Well, you better call him up and tell him we're going to tar and feather his ass. You don't give that kind of information out.
Tell me about it.
Idaho doesn't even exist.
I know. The spot I used to hunt in Idaho with a couple of my buddies, it's been destroyed because of things like that. So
yeah, the volcano that came in and melted the entire state really sucks. Right. Sorry for all those that drew tags here, but it's gone. It's gone.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, getting back to that. Okay, basically, take it from where you were, man. I'm enthralled with these pictures.
Yep. So we do the best thing to do that is do the circumference cut, and then you want to go around on a shoulder mount. The easiest way to do it is go to the knee, make a cut all the way around the knee on a deer, elk, moose, antelope, whatever any ungulate, and then you basically want to make the third cut you want to do is you want to start from that circumference cut on the spine line. And you want to stay on the spine and make a cut all the way up to the back of the head. Don't go any further than the back of the head. If you find yourself between the ears, you went too far. And that cut allows you to basically unfold the neck, if you will. Mm-hmm. You want to skin down both sides. And again, we're talking about using a really sharp knife when you do this. A lot of times, let's be honest. I'm a hunter myself. These animals never die in the most convenient of spots, okay? It's really easy for me to say to do this and to even demonstrate it on a big cement floor in the shop. But, when they die on a steep hillside and you're tying a front leg up because they're getting ready to slide down the rest of the hill, I get it. So, mistakes can happen. But if you have an animal that's positioned right, you want to make sure and do the cuts you can. So stay right on that spine line. Don't waver off to the side because it can affect the sewing process later on. So that essentially, those are your three main cuts, or four if you count each leg. And you basically want to unfold that cape from the neck, and then you want to tube the legs out. And tubing means you basically kind of unglove it, if you will. Don't make a cut up the back of the legs. Some of these animals, especially deer that are pretty small, like some of these whitetails, it's really hard to tube that leg or slip that leg out without making a cut on the back. If you have to make a cut on the back of the leg, there's two distinct hairlines on the back of any animal's leg. One is on the inside of the leg, which ends up going into the armpit. And the other one is the outside, or is the very back of the leg where the two hair colors come together. That's the one you want to stay on. If you have to make a cut, stay on that line that goes up the very back of the leg, and don't cut up all the way. Just cut up enough to where you can basically allow you to slip that leg out. And that will kind of free up that entire cape for you to take in the taxidermist. Where people screw up with those animals is when they're making their circumference cut. The biggest mistake I see, and it doesn't matter if it's moose, blacktail, elk, it doesn't matter, is that when they're making their circumference cut, for some reason, when people are making that cut down and they're getting down by the brisket, instead of staying in a straight line and going up the other side of the animal, they automatically kind of cut up towards the brisket or get into the brisket. Does that make sense?
Re-explain that, actually, because that did not make sense the way I interpreted it.
Let's say you have an elk down and you're making your first cut, which is your circumference cut, right?
Uh-huh.
and you start up at the spine, you start down the right side of the animal, and you're going to make a loop that goes all the way around the circumference of the animal. The problem is when people are making their cut down the side of the body, they inadvertently come up towards the chest area. They don't stay the same distance as they did at the top of the spine.
Oh,
so
gotcha.
They end up cutting up into the brisket. What most people don't understand with the taxidermy process is that most of the slack that comes from a shoulder mount is dictated by the length of the brisket. So if you've cut a brisket too short, you've got no slack up top in order to pull that. It just doesn't work very well.
Okay.
And for some reason, that's what happens. Is I see a lot of elk where they cut the brisket. Elk, they come down, they go tan, and then they get into that dark hair, and then it starts getting into like that curly dark hair right at the brisket.
Yeah.
And I'll have a ton of elk that will come in, and there's no dark hair. They just like cut the brisket completely off.
Oh, shit.
And it's like, well, we've got two options. Either we recape this animal, we use a different cape, or we have to cut a form down, which you're not going to like. And that's one of those mistakes we talk about. We can fix most stuff, but the material is not there. I can't make it magically appear. So that's one area where people tend to really screw up as they get too far up. Same with blacktails. They have a big black patch right at their brisket, and they cut it off. Same with mule deer. They're real similar to a mule deer. They have that big black, brisket. So that's one of the biggest mistakes that I see in the shop, is that people cut too close to that brisket.
Okay. Do you, Joel, do you have like a video on your website or on a YouTube channel? Have you ever considered?
Yeah. So actually Hunt Washington, a local forum here, has actually asked me to do a video.
Is that Johnny Mac?
No. Bob, he goes by the name Bobcat. He's one of the administrators.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Robert, I can't remember his last name. His daughter brought in a really cool deer a couple of years ago.
Did I totally screw that up? I thought that was like Johnny Mac's platform.
Oh no, that's I forget the guy's name. I forget his name.
Okay.
He does cougar hunts all over the place.
Everybody in Washington, forgive me for that. I'm sorry about that.
No. So they've actually asked me to do a video. I'd like to do that. The problem is a lot of times when hunting season rolls in, I'm flying just trying to get stuff put away and things like that. But I would actually like to sit down with the cape of an animal and go over all the major cuts. I recently did it with bears. So bear season just kicked off August 1st. We had spring bear season, and now August 1st we have bear season, and they have been falling here like you wouldn't believe. But I did a video, and it's on my Facebook account, I have a bear hide that's laid out, and we talk about the different cuts that you want to use for shoulder mounts or rugs, or versus a full mount, stuff like that.
Oh,
and it kind of goes over some of the specifics, how to make the cuts, considerations if you're not sure what kind of mount you want to do. And then there's even a recent video that I put on there on salting, which that is kind of one of the don'ts, and that is don't salt your hide, and we can talk about that later on. So.
Well, is there anything else you want to cover on the caping side? Because I'd love to get into it. I hate to keep you all night, but
oh, no,
I feel like
fine.
we're just getting into the nuts and bolts of this.
Yep.
I do need to point out I'm onto your scheme, Joel.
Oh.
I'm on your galleries page here, and I noticed you're hanging all these big elk and deer on the same tree.
Yeah, that tree has become famous at my house.
It looks pretty famous.
So,
it's pretty cool.
So it's funny because I have a big shop, and it's got a big burnt cedar wall that I purposely did because it looks really cool for display, and I take photos on there. I have had and the shop is relatively new. We've only been in the new facility for about 2 years. I have had people where I've taken a photo of their trophy and I've sent it to them, and I'm like, hey, it's done. And they're like, man, can you really get a picture of it on that oak tree?
That's awesome.
That oak tree is famous.
Dude, it's cool. It's like, it's got these huge, beautiful branches, and it's got this moss cover, that's famous for the Northwest, and it's just kind of a cool backdrop. I don't know. Good job with that.
I feel really bad for the logger, whoever it is that takes that thing down eventually, because there are some serious nails in that thing. So.
They're going to go through some chains, but that's okay.
Bears is about the only other thing to cover, and that's, because we talked about a lot of the ungulates.
Yep, let's cover bears.
Bears are the really big thing where you see the other screw up, and a lot of that kind of leads into one of the other topics, which is just kind of hide preservation. So once you get the hide off of it. as far as bears, as far as cutting, there's two really distinct cuts that you're going to do. One's called a belly cut, which is also the same cut that we use for the rugs. And that's the cut that that type of cut is the most generic, probably the way that 90% of all bears are skinned. The other cut is what we call a dorsal cut. A dorsal cut is exactly as it sounds. It goes right up the spine line, and that's the only cut you make. You basically glove the entire animal down. And that's for like full mounts. That's for shoulder mounts or half mounts, which are becoming really popular. And that's just, you basically go from the tail all the way up to the back of the head, and then you just start peeling around it. Go all the way down the legs. Where you see a lot of mess ups as far as cuts that are made in everything from bears to elk is that when people get down around the armpits, they don't take their time and they make cuts into the armpits. It's one of the thinnest spots on the animal. Doesn't matter what species it is. And it's also one of the hardest. It's also one of the hardest to hide by far. So, you get that real thin armpit hair or that armpit hide of an elk and you have to stitch it. You can imagine how much of a pain it is to hide it. So
is that the same if you're doing a bear rug?
No, because the rugs, you're going to cut them up. You're going to cut them up the center. Yes, when you get to the armpits, take your time.
Okay.
With rugs, a lot of times we're going to dye the flanks. So the flanks, on like a bear are a lot lighter than the rest of the hide. One, because the hide is covered with a lot more hair on the entirety of the animal versus the armpit. So we'll dye the flanks and so any stitching, it kind of hides it a heck of a lot better. But some of the other mounts, we don't always do that. So you just got to be really careful around there. So, and again, with bears, you want to leave the paws in. You don't want to try and take the paws out unless you've done it, because those are very intricate, taking those out. And then of course you want to leave the hide in as well, or the head in as well. So
I got a thing for bear rugs, man. I have not been a long time bear hunter. In fact, I just started a couple of years ago. This is only my second spring bear season this year. And I got screwed because we were moving, and so I didn't get to hunt very much. But anyway, I do want to do a bear rug. And it's like, because my dad has one, I feel like I need one.
I think I would say that's
an old school thing.
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. I think that's 95% of everybody that gets their first bear. That's what they want to do. The other thing that's becoming really, really popular these days is the packboard mounts. So I do a lot of the packboard bears. I don't know if I have any up on the gallery. I should, but those things are, oh my gosh, I do so many of those stinking things here, and they look awesome. Especially if you get a bear that's not real big, you can kind of hide the size by when you roll the hide up, and put it into a packboard mount. It doesn't.
Got a packboard on it looks like a big mule deer or something.
Yeah,
on the gallery.
That's a stud mule deer too.
It is a stud mule deer, man. Like, shut up, don't rub it in. I mean,
well, it's not mine. I wish it was, but
no, he's awesome. Okay, cool. Anything else we need to know about black bears?
No, I think that's good. As far as the other stuff, it's pretty much similar as far as shoulder mounts and everything. When you start, like I said, if you start getting into something where you're going to go on a mountain goat or anything like that, always check with your taxidermist you're going to use how they want to cut, because you start getting into some of those more rare type breeds or exotics, you really need to ask your taxidermist how he wants to cut. And he'll go over that with you.
Okay. Okay. That's great. That's great advice, actually. The thing that pops into my mind, I think we just touched on it, is like the preservation of the hide. Temperatures. What do we need to do? You had mentioned never to salt the hide.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people that's going to be surprising to hear.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So you're in the back. Start off with a scenario here, and you're in the backcountry 8 miles. You've got an elk cape off this elk. The biggest thing that you want to do, one of the biggest fallacies that we see with degradation of that hide, or what we call slipping, which is essentially the first start of decomposition on a hide to where the hair will naturally pull. Once that, it'll just pull out. Once that starts, there ain't nothing you're going to do about it. It's done. So don't, if the hide gets to that point and you're 8 miles in, don't even try getting it out. It's not going to work.
Okay.
But the best thing to do.
I'm sorry, and maybe you said this and I missed it, because I'm stuck on your gallery here on the website. What creates that? Is that heat? Is it time?
Both. It's a little bit of both. It's just the natural process, and the big thing that really starts it is heat. I had a guy a couple of years ago, a client that went up on a bear hunt up north. He shot 2 tremendous black bears. He shot a 6'8" black bear and a 7'2" black bear.
Oh, damn.
They skinned them both out and immediately rolled them up and put them into a cooler. Okay, now everybody would think, oh, that's good. The problem is that is the best insulating rain gear that God ever made. So when you roll that up, even if you put it into a freezer, the center of that roll is not going to get cool for 3 or 4 days.
Gotcha.
So what happened is we sent the hide came into me. There was a little bit of a smell to it, but I didn't see anything that was real outstanding. And so we sent it off to the tannery. The tannery called me back, and they're like, dude, this bear is slipping all over the place. It's the hair's falling out everywhere through the tanning process. So I had to, and I didn't know what had happened at this point. I just knew that the guy brought these bears in. When I called the client and told him, which is I've only made that phone call a couple times in the years I've been doing this, and it's a horrible phone call to make.
Yeah.
He told me, I said, well, did you guys, he said, yeah, we skinned it up and rolled it and put it in the cooler. I said, did you guys lay it out and let it cool off first? And he goes, no, we just rolled it up and threw it in there. That's one of the biggest things that people forget is that once you get that thing, lay it out, put it, if you're out in the backcountry, you get an elk, lay that hide out, get it not in sun, put it in some shade. Even if it's 75 degrees out, let it cool off and let it get ambient temperature. If you have a little bit of a breeze, let it get over it. Let it cool off before you even roll it up and put it in a meat sack before you pack it out.
When you're hanging it like that, are you hanging it like first side up or vice versa?
No, you want to put first side down.
First side down, and just let all that heat escape.
Let the heat escape. Try and clean the hide off as best you can. Bears, it's really tough because their hair or their hide, believe it or not, is super, super easy to cut through.
Yeah.
So with elk, you want to try and clean off as much as the red meat as you possibly can because that's going to hold the heat more than anything else.
And how do you recommend cleaning the red meat off?
Just kind of take your time. It's just kind of, when you try and, when you're a butcher, if you butcher your own elk up and you cut through the viscera sections of when you're quartering an elk or when you're boning out an elk, it's kind of the same principle. There's usually a viscera level between the hide and the meat itself. So if you can kind of find that and peel that away a little bit and get that off of there, great. You're not going to get everything, but just get the real big chunks off of there to facilitate cooling that thing down.
Okay. Go ahead.
No, and that's also going to help with your weight too.
Can I throw some scenarios at you?
Absolutely.
Okay. September, it's 79 degrees. Just smoked a big bull. He's a great bull. I'm super excited. I'm gonna hide this thing out so I can take it into you, get it shoulder mounted. When I get that hide off, as we described before, the cape, and it's 79 degrees, and I find some shade to hang it first side down in, how long does it take to cool that? Or do you have an answer to that, or is that dependent? Or
yeah, it's real real variable.
It's going to be variable, but how
soon
give
it an hour?
Okay, give it an hour.
So like if you get that cape off and you either hang it on, you don't even have to hang it on something. Even if you lay it on the ground, you do the hair side down and let the skin side up just kind of be open to the elements. You're fine.
So before rolling it up, is a goal to kind of get it to the point where when you feel it with the touch of your hand, it's cooled off, or like you're not seeing steam?
Yep. You know how when any animal you get, even if it's hot out and you hang them up, even though it's 80 degrees out, you touch that meat and after it's cooled off, it almost feels colder than the ambient temperature.
Yes.
That's what you're looking for in those hides.
Okay.
You're looking for that for adequately. And a good way of doing it is when you get an animal down, the first thing you're probably going to do is you're probably going to take the cape off, first.
Yeah.
So take the cape off, lay that thing out. By the time you get that animal broken down, it doesn't matter if it's a deer or an elk because a deer doesn't need as much time as an elk does to cool off. By the time you get that animal broke down and ready to start packing out, that hide's going to be fine.
Perfect.
It's going to be cool enough, and it doesn't really matter as long as you keep it out of the sun and you just kind of let that. You put the skin side up to the elements where it can cool off adequately.
Okay, scenario number 2. You ready?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's October 21st. I'm a rifle elk hunter. I just nailed a big bull. Really excited about it. I caped it out, and I got the hide back to camp, but I'm hunting with 3 other people that still have, let's say 5 days of hunting left.
Yeah.
What do I do with that?
Good scenario.
In that situation, you're camped in the high country. It's again, it's October, so it's not like we're talking, 75, 85 degrees. We're talking more probably high of the high 60s kind of situation.
What's your temperatures at night though? You're probably getting pretty darn close to freezing.
Yeah,
right?
Well, it depends on where you're at. So in the high country where I hunt, you're getting down into the high 30s at night. So
yep. So bacteria starts to promote. They say 40 Fahrenheit. I'm going to disagree with that. I'm going to go 37. I'll even go as far as saying 36 degrees is where you start. You really want to keep it down below 36 degrees. It doesn't have to be frozen.
Okay.
I did an experiment years ago. I took a deer hide that I didn't care about, and I put it in. It's one of mine. Don't worry. No customers are like, oh, that's where my deer hide went. No, it was my own. It was a piece of deer hide that I put in a freezer, or I put it in one of my coolers. It was at 36 degrees. I put it in a plastic bag. It was relatively free of all flesh and everything like that. And I rolled it up and I put it in there. At 36 to 37 degrees, it kept in that bag with no degradation and no decomp for about 2 weeks. No problem.
Gotcha.
It actually got a little bit of a sour smell to it, but the hair and everything was still completely intact. So my advice, there's a couple different things. We can even go far as your scenario of saying that it doesn't get below 50 at night. There's a couple of different options. One, if you have access to snow, you can pack that bugger in snow or put it in a black plastic. I always tell people take black plastic bags with you when you go hunting.
Mm-hmm.
And you never want to put a cape or anything in a black plastic bag when you're hiking out because it can start to heat up. However, once you get back to camp and that thing is fairly cooled off, put it in one of those heavy duty black contractor bags.
Yeah. Folks, go to Home Depot, get a contractor bag. They're phenomenal.
Yeah. I use them because even like when you're putting like a quarter in your pack to just do a quick hike out, a couple miles or whatever, man, you put them in there, that thing will slide into your pack so stinking easy, a quarter of an elk versus anyway. So put that thing in there, seal the top up. If you got access to a creek, put it in a creek. It will cool that hide off so stinking quick. And as long as you don't have the water that's coming in contact with the hide, that's pretty much like sticking them just in the refrigerator.
Okay.
So that works out really good. Of course, if you have access to a cooler with ice, you never want to put hides directly onto ice. Put them in a bag, then put ice on. You can pack ice around them. You just don't want water coming in contact with it because when it does, it starts to actually soften the hide, and then you can start the degradation process a little bit sooner. So
the one thing I would like to throw into that, because I think that's fantastic advice, Joel. The one thing that happened to me, and this was actually last year, when I had because I'll tan my own deer hides periodically just as a sideshow hobby thing that I do to feel like I'm a mountain man, And I hung it over this rock to kind of air out or whatever, and came back the next morning and a coyote had ripped it apart. And so I'm throwing out that warning, like if somebody had a 300 plus inch bull down or something like that, some huge buck, and they're looking forward to getting it mounted. You do need to be a little bit cognizant of these damn coyotes. I didn't realize that they would be interested in the hide as much as they were, but I mean, they shredded it, dude.
Oh, absolutely. And then, of course, guys, we're dealing with the ever existing problem of grizzlies now. And so, they'll come to that just as quickly as they will, meat. There's, usually if it's in a creek, it's in a plastic bag. Usually you're okay. The other thing that I've done, it sounds kind of weird. I actually learned it from an old mountain man guy. It actually has worked is, drink a bunch of water and pee around that thing. But then I've also been told by people that doesn't work either. So I don't know.
It depends. I'm somewhat of an expert on this. It depends on the damn coyote. Some coyotes do not want anything to do with human piss. Others don't give a shit. So
if it lives in town, it's a little trash panda and it smells out all the time.
Exactly. Yeah. Super dependent on the coyote and where you're at. So
right.
The other question would be, Joel, we're gonna switch from elk hunting. We're big time whitetail mountain public land whitetail hunters, right? And we get a deer down. It's November 15th. And we get this crazy cold front that comes in, and we're letting this cape kind of air out and not realizing how cold it's going to get that night, and it gets down to like 10 or 15 degrees and freezes it. Does that ruin it, or is that okay?
Nope.
Because you're going to thaw it out, right?
Yeah, the freezing is actually better. I tell people, I'm like, man, if you've got one of those coolers, that you have, some of the big Yetis or stuff like that, and they have a cape with the head sitting in there, and they're like, do I keep ice on it all night? I'm like, well, what temperature does it get? Oh, it gets down to 20. I'm like, open that freaking cooler up. Let that thing freeze solid.
Okay, I think with my question on that, though, is I know that freezing it is good, but I have heard, and again, this is just, sometimes I say things, it reminds me of when I was in the military, and the military is just a big rumor. Everything's a rumor. Oh, I heard we're going to do this. Oh, I heard we're going to do that. That's kind of what this is, right? I heard that if you allow it to freeze and it's November, it's cold, the thing is frozen solid, and then you have to like thaw it out to take it to the taxidermist kind of thing, and then he has to freeze it again. That could weaken the fur in the hide. Is that an old wives' tale, or is there any merit to it?
No, I have quite a few guys that it'll be frozen prior to me getting it, because they'll be in Montana and they have it sitting out and stuff like that, and then it defrosts by the time it gets here, and then I refreeze again. No, the one thing you do see with problems with the hide is where people drag them, where they will drag an animal, a deer primarily. I mean, my God, if you're dragging an elk, give me your phone number. I need to call you in September when I get one down. But
Andre the Giant.
Right. So I've got a buddy I've seen him put half an elk on his back. He's a valuable asset come September. But
give him my number.
Dragging his you never want to drag any of your stuff, because even though let's say you shot a big mule deer, you've got a quarter mile to go to the truck, you're in Montana, you're in sage country, you're like, oh, let's just drag this thing. Man, I'm telling you, you get back to the truck and you look at it, you're like, oh, look, it didn't mess anything up. Oh, it did. And you won't see it until after we go through the tanning process. I had a guy that brought in a blacktail a couple years ago, tremendous blacktail. He admitted, he's like, yeah, I drug it to the truck. I'm like, ew, how far did you drag it? And he's just like, oh, we drove it like 500 yards. Everything looked good. Whoa. It went through the tanning process. It came out of the tanning tank, and it was completely bald where he drug it.
Yeah.
So it messes that's what we'll do. And I know it's kind of off subject from the freezing, but no, to answer your question more.
No, that's good. I think a lot of people do that and would be surprised. They take it to the taxidermist, and when it gets tanned out, that it balds right there. Because I mean, I can't tell you how many deer I've drug out of the field, and just luckily I've never taken it to a taxidermist. So
right, it busts those pedicles off down at the skin level, and you can't see it, and then through the tanning process it comes out, and then you're screwed. So, but yeah, refreezing, that's not a big deal. Where you have problems where freezing occurs is where people will store them in a freezer for too long, or they don't store them correctly. So they don't get a bag. You see it a lot of times with bears, or you see it a lot of times with deer that have been in a freezer for years and years and years, and the wife finally yells at the guy to get it out of there, and he decides to take it to a taxidermist. And what happens is the ears or the nose or the eyes, they get freezer burned enough that when we go through the process called turning, where we turn the lips, ears, and eyes all inside out, it's kind of an intricate process. The freezer burn is so bad that the connective tissue between the skin and either the fat or the other side of the skin, like an ear, it just won't separate. And then you end up there's nothing you can do. You can't get it separated.
Huh.
And
okay, that's good to know.
That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen on a hunt where it even freezes a couple different times during your hunt.
I know this dude that had he had a mule deer with a cape in his freezer in the garage, a chest freezer there, for 3.5 years. I don't know what he did with it, actually, because I moved away from that area. So I'd be curious to know if he ever did it. It was a great buck.
Yeah, if you package them, they're not too bad. I had a guy that brought in a bear last year that was in a gunny sack. It wasn't in a plastic bag, and he didn't roll the hide up. I always tell people on the bears, especially if the head is still in it, put the head on the very inside of the roll, so the ears and the eyes and everything are all protected. And but it wasn't rolled like that. The head was on the outside. He had it in a gunny sack, so lots of air getting through there. He had it in a chest freezer. It had only been in the chest freezer for about a year. And the thing was so freezer burned, I could barely do it. On the flip side, I had a guy that brought in a bear that was in a freezer, correctly wrapped and packaged. It was in the freezer for 8 years, and it was like it was killed. It was like it was killed yesterday. I had no problems turning it whatsoever.
That's nuts. Okay.
Yeah.
Another scenario for you. One more.
Yep.
I don't care what month. It's September, October, whatever, deer or elk, and they're hanging it flesh side up, maybe overnight. I don't know if that's recommended or not, but maybe overnight. And freak thunderstorm comes through and soaks it. Issue or not?
No, not really. It's going to get a little bit wet. If anything, it's going to put on a crap load of weight if you're planning on packing out the next day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
You just, as long as you leave it hung up and as long as it can drain, that's not a big issue. You just don't want it coming in contact with stuff like creek water or, heaven forbid, like a wallow or something like that. But, because that's going to have a tremendous amount of bacteria.
Okay.
So, and the bacteria is the big thing that you're fighting. And that's why, like the animals, like some of the bears and wolves and stuff like that, they carry bacteria in them that is just absolutely insane. And so that's why bears, we see a lot of times bears degrade twice as fast as an elk hide does, just because they have so much bacteria within them. So
that's super interesting. Huh. Yeah. And that makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Well, Joel, I could keep this going for a long time, man, but we're an hour and a half into this. We probably better wrap it up. I love this conversation, dude. I knew it was going to be a good conversation. So I want to talk about Black River taxidermy. I don't know if you want to, market your business here on the Western Huntsman much more to if you're super busy, but at least give everybody kind of an idea as to, like, do you accept animals for work from all over the place, have them ship them to you, or are you more of a local, accept them that way? Give us a gist on that.
Yeah, a little bit of both. I have stuff that's shipped to me from all over. I get a lot of clients that will send me stuff. They'll go into Alaska and they'll ship them to me. I always request that people, give me a call before they do that, just so I kind of know when something's coming in.
You get some random giraffe shows up in the mail.
Yeah. So I always do that, but a lot of stuff is local. I live in the Pacific Northwest, which I'm telling you, I deal with a lot of animal exchange and some big studios in the Midwest. And they're always calling me for, that they always tell me, they're like, man, you were lucky as hell. And I'm like, why? And I'm like, because you live in the Pacific Northwest, you get to work with everything. You have Roosevelt, you have Rocky, you have mule deer, you have whitetail, and you have kind of the coup de grace, the Columbia blacktail. I have people that, they'll call me looking for capes all the time. We deal with a lot of capes. People come and do like a cape exchange in exchange for a European. Because you'll have these guys that will go down to California and they'll shoot these. I'm sorry, California, they're not blacktails, but they shoot these quote blacktails, and they're ugly as hell, and they want to buy a Columbia blacktail cape from the Pacific Northwest to put on with the deer. And it's like, that's cheating.
That's what you get. That's probably Guy down there at Western Contours calling you up with that kind of. I'm telling you right now.
But yeah, so you get stuff shipped on occasion.
I hope he knows I'm kidding.
A lot of local stuff. Oh, I'm sure.
He gives me a hard time on his show all the time, so I'm giving him a hard time back. He's in California.
I'm waiting for your phone to hear, the bing.
Bing. So, he drinks the White Claws.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That kind of guy,
huh? That kind of that explains the whole thing, right?
Right.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. So a lot of stuff is local. Yes, I do. I am taking clients this year. Bears have been absolutely tremendous in the state of Washington. The bear numbers are coming up, and I'm not even going to go into that subject because that's a whole other podcast. We take stuff in. Usually I always request either people call. I get a lot of, with social media these days, I get a lot of inquiries on social media and also through email and stuff. And some of them work really good. Some people, it's brand new hunters and they're kind of sticker shock with prices and everything else. And I'm not that. I'm probably middle of the road as far as like taxidermists around here and stuff like that. So
that's a good point, man. I think that a lot of people don't understand the magnitude of the expense of a good taxidermist. So just as a general range, like let's say I get this monster whitetail and I have $1,500 in my bank account for a taxidermist. Will that cover it for a mule deer?
Shoulder mount?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you could probably do 2 of them. And I mean,
Okay.
Again,
okay.
I'm not going to speak for other taxidermists.
I know you're not. I know, and I'm not holding you to any prices.
Right.
But
so like right now, so like if you were to call me and say, I've got a nice mule deer, I want to do a shoulder mount, it's $700 and a little bit of tax on top of that.
okay.
So, bears are pretty expensive. Everybody kind of gets surprised with bears. They're probably one of the more expensive ones. There was an article that came out a couple years ago in a magazine, and I'm not saying this to justify prices or anything like that. I mean, shoot, I remember when I was 16, I shot my first bear. I went in, I was going to have a rug made out of it. I didn't ultimately have a rug made out of it, which is one of my biggest regrets. And it was like you could get a nice bear rug for $500-$600.
Yeah,
Now they're anywhere from $1,200 to $3,000, depending on how big the bear is and what you want to go for the pose.
That's perfect. That's what I was going to ask you. I shoot a nice bear. I've got $2,000 in my bank account. Is it reasonable to expect I can get a decent bear rug made out of it?
Yeah, and it just kind of depends again on the pose and everything else. But and that kind of varies.
I want mine posed as the Karate Kid with the one leg up, both hands raised. Is $2,500 reasonable for that pose on a black bear?
Not even close.
Damn, man. You've crushed my hopes and dreams.
Well, what are the 3 most honest things in the world? Yoga pants, drunk people, and 5-year-olds. So I'm just telling you the truth.
I've never heard that. I love it.
Yeah.
I'm going to plagiarize that. Okay.
Yeah, go for it, man. It's patented, It's copyrighted.
I've got a really nice bull elk down, and I've got $1,900 in my bank account. Is it reasonable to expect a good head mount out of that?
Yeah, for me, absolutely. I'm about $1,500 for an elk shoulder mount. I know some guys that charge quite a bit more, and I know some guys that charge less. Again, you kind of have to go and look at people's work and see what you like. Yeah, absolutely. So
tell me that saying again. It's a yoga pants. And
the 3 most honest thing in the world is drunk people, 5-year-olds, and yoga pants.
I'm telling my wife that. She'll like that.
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, you'll never be able to come visit here. Like, hey, we're going to watch her stopping at Joel. She's like, wait a minute, that was the yoga pants comment, right?
She'll dig it. We make fun of some, well, never mind. I won't go there. We're recording. Anyways.
Yeah, right.
Joel, I feel like that the audience is going to get a lot out of this episode.
Good.
I always want to say more than most other episodes, but I would say that on every episode because I don't know, not every guest we've had on the show has been absolutely impactful like that, but I gotta say I feel like I just am lucky that way. I get some really good guests, man, and they're just really informative like you are. They're folks that are just down to earth and want to talk about this stuff and are passionate about what they do. And I feel like
I don't know. You had Tony Winthrop on here. He's kind of a character.
Well, I know, but that's
shout out to him if he's listening.
I'm just saying he is not a part of the group. I mean, he wears a cowboy hat, and
but boy, you want to get a good Rosie. He's the guy to talk to. So.
Tony is one of the most salt of the earth dudes I've ever met in my life, and I'd love to get him back on. Actually, I need to get him back on the show. Me and him keep threatening about we're going to exchange hunts. So we're gonna figure it out. I'd love to get him around a campfire. So you know what we ought to do between you and Tony and Joel Turner and everybody over there, Mike Hers,
the Pacific Northwest.
You gotta get all these guys that just some good dudes over there, man. We ought to do like a Pacific Northwest hunt where we get this big camp together.
Well, you guys plan it. I'll be there. So.
All right, you got a deal. Brother. We're going to figure it out. So I appreciate you coming on. What I'm going to do, guys, in the show notes, I'm going to put blackrivertaxidermy.com in the show notes. I'm going to put your Instagram and your Facebook in there. Is there anything else you want me to put in there?
No, not at all. Just let people know, if you ever have, I'm not one of those, even if you're not a client, man, if you ever have questions, I have a real, that's one reason why I wanted to come do this is I love helping people be successful, even if it's on the whole taxidermy side of thing. There's a lot of disconnect of information from the hunter to the taxidermist, and I think that's something that's really lacking in the industry. You can get online and read 500 reviews on different knives, but you can't find a review on a lot of times on proper caping methods and stuff like that. And so,
True.
You know, anybody ever has any questions, give me a call. I love chatting with people and making connections and just,
yeah, for sure,
fun,
man.
So.
For sure, man. We're gonna keep in touch, and we're gonna figure out how to get you over here to Idaho to do like a caping seminar. And I'm serious about that stuff. I've got some ideas together. And we're gonna make it happen. So again,
Perfect.
I appreciate you coming on the show. I'm glad we connected. This was awesome.
Yeah, it's been great, man. Well, thank you so much.
And I already asked you that, so never mind. You have a great night, dude.
Yep, you too. We'll talk to you later.
You made it all the way to the end. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. We sure appreciate your support. This is Jim Huntsman signing off and reminding you to check us out at Instagram at The Western Huntsman and on Facebook at The Western Huntsman. And you can also check out the website at thewesternhuntsman.com. Thanks again. We'll see you guys next time. Stay Western, and I'll see you on the mountain.